The research station hung like a silver needle against the vast darkness of space, its sterile white corridors humming with quiet tension. Una Park walked with measured steps, her lab coat crisp and white, hands steady despite the weight of her mission. Arya wasn't just another specimen. She was different. The alien creature had been contained for 7 years, observed, but never truly understood. Most researchers feared her, a being of shifting colors and impossible biology that seemed to respond to emotions more than physical stimuli. The containment chamber was a marvel of engineering. Thick, transparent walls curved in a perfect circle, embedded with sensors that could detect the slightest change in atmospheric pressure, temperature, or biological activity. Arya's living space was a carefully constructed environment that mimicked her original planetary conditions. When Una first saw her, Arya looked almost peaceful. Her body, if it could be called a body, was a fluid mass of silver and blue, sometimes crystalline, sometimes almost liquid. She could change form with remarkable speed, a defense mechanism that had terrified previous research teams. The previous lead researcher, Dr. Kim, had documented countless incidents. Arya would suddenly transform, creating sharp, crystalline structures when she felt threatened. One researcher had lost an arm during an early observation session. Another had been hospitalized with severe psychological trauma, unable to speak about what she had witnessed. But Una saw something different. Where others saw a monster, she saw an intelligence waiting to be understood. Her first approach was subtle. She didn't make sudden movements. She didn't carry weapons. Instead, she brought a small device that could translate complex emotional signatures. Her colleagues thought she was crazy. Some even laughed when she proposed her research approach. "You can't communicate with something that might kill you in seconds," her senior researcher had warned. Una understood the risks, but she also understood that fear often masked the most profound scientific discoveries. The first day she entered the chamber, Arya remained still. Her body shifted from silver to a deep blue, then to a soft turquoise. The color changes weren't random, they were communication. Una knew this instinctively. She sat on the floor about 3 meters from Arya. No sudden movements, no threats, just presence. Hours passed. The research team watched through external monitors, their breath collectively held. Some were betting she would be attacked. Others were certain she was wasting time. As the artificial lighting in the chamber began to dim, signaling the end of the observation cycle, something unexpected happened. Arya slowly moved, not aggressively, not in attack, but with a curious, almost gentle motion. One of her crystalline extensions, something between a tendril and a hand, extended slightly towards Una, not to harm, but to investigate. The monitoring team gasped. In 7 years, Arya had never voluntarily moved towards a human. Every previous interaction had been defensive, violent, unpredictable. Una remained perfectly still. Her training in xenobiology had prepared her for this moment. Slow breathing, no sudden reactions, complete emotional neutrality. Arya's extension came closer, close enough that Una could see intricate patterns within her crystalline structure. They weren't random, they were complex. They were beautiful. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, researcher and alien studied each other. No words, no sounds, just pure raw observation. Then, as quietly as it had begun, the moment passed. Arya retreated, her body shifting, back to its original silvery state. But something had changed, something fundamental. The research team would later review the footage hundreds of times. They would argue about what had happened. Some would call it luck. Others would dismiss it as a random occurrence. Una knew better. This was just the beginning. Her colleagues didn't realize it yet, but first contact had just occurred, and it would change everything they understood about alien intelligence. As she left the chamber that night, Una understood one thing with absolute clarity. Arya was not a monster. She was a mystery waiting to be solved, and Una Park was going to be the one to solve it. The research lab buzzed with nervous energy. Yuna's colleagues watched through thick glass as she prepared her communication device, a complex system of visual and emotional translators designed specifically for Arya. Most scientists believed communication was impossible. Arya had destroyed every previous attempt at interaction. Her body could transform from soft liquid to razor-sharp crystal in milliseconds, making her unpredictable and dangerous. Yuna's device looked simple: a small circular panel with multiple color-changing sensors and a holographic interface. She had spent months programming it, studying the subtle color shifts in Arya's body that seemed to indicate emotional states. On the first day of her experiment, Yuna entered the chamber wearing a lightweight protective suit, not for physical protection, but to minimize any potential threat signals. Her movements were slow, calculated, almost dance-like in their precision. Arya watched. Her silvery body remained still, but the edges began to shift subtly. Blues and greens rippled across her surface, a response that previous researchers had never managed to decode. Yuna activated the translation device. Soft musical tones emerged, matching the color patterns of Arya's body. It was a language without words, a communication based on pure emotional signature. Hours passed. The research team outside grew restless. Some wanted to abort the experiment. Others watched in fascinated silence. Suddenly, Arya moved. Not aggressively, but with a curious extension of her crystalline form. She seemed to be listening, studying, responding. The translation device captured something extraordinary. Emotional data that suggested Arya wasn't just reacting, but actually communicating. Her color shifts were complex language patterns, far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Yuna remained calm. She understood that patience was key. Every tiny reaction could mean something significant. By the third day, a breakthrough occurred. Arya began producing specific color sequences that the device could partially translate. Fragments of emotional content emerged. Something about loss, about survival, about a home that no longer existed. The research team was stunned. This wasn't just communication. This was a profound connection with an entirely alien intelligence. Fragments of Arya's history began to emerge. She was a survivor of a planetary disaster. Her species had been hunted, systematically eliminated by more technologically advanced civilizations. What humans saw as aggression was actually a complex survival mechanism. Yuna realized Arya wasn't a monster. She was a refugee, a survivor, someone who had lost everything and was learning to trust again. Each communication session revealed more. Arya's body could store memories like a living computer. Her crystalline structure wasn't just a physical form, but a complex biological system that could process and store information in ways humans could barely comprehend. The research facility began to change. What was once a containment chamber became a communication laboratory. Yuna's colleagues, initially skeptical, now watched with increasing excitement. By the end of the first month, they had developed a rudimentary communication system. Arya could express basic concepts, emotions, memories. Her transformation from a feared specimen to a potential diplomatic contact was remarkable, but challenges remained. Trust was fragile. One wrong move could destroy everything they had achieved. Yuna understood the stakes. This wasn't just a scientific discovery, this was a potential bridge between species, between understanding and fear. As another communication session ended, Arya's body shifted into a soft blue, a color that the translation device now recognized as something close to gratitude, or perhaps hope. The mystery of Arya was just beginning to unfold, and Yuna Park was at the center of a discovery that would change humanity's understanding of intelligent life forever. Outside the chamber, the universe waited, dark and infinite, holding its breath. The research facility had grown quiet. Most staff had gone home, leaving only Yuna and her small night team monitoring Arya's chamber. Something felt different tonight, a tension that couldn't be explained by standard scientific instruments. Yuna's hands moved carefully across her translation device. Her movements were slower, more deliberate. She carried a small holographic image, a photograph of her brother lost 3 years ago during a deep space exploration mission. Arya's body began to shift. Soft silver transformed into deep blues and muted grays, colors that seemed to carry weight like emotional shadows. The translation device hummed softly, capturing every subtle change. For the first time, Yuna decided to share something personal. She projected the image of her brother near the chamber's central interface. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "His name was Jay," she said. "He disappeared during a mission near the Andromeda sector. We never found his ship. Never found his body." The research team watching through external monitors held their breath. This was unprecedented. No researcher had ever attempted such a personal approach with Arya. Arya's crystalline form began to move, not aggressively, but with a strange, almost gentle curiosity. Her body's color pattern started matching the emotional frequency of Yuna's voice, deep blue merging with soft gray, creating a visual representation of shared loss. The translation device went crazy. It was capturing something beyond simple communication. This was an emotional exchange, a connection that transcended language and biological differences. Fragments of Arya's own history began to emerge. Her species had experienced a complete, planetary destruction. Billions of her kind had been eliminated by aggressive spacefaring civilizations. She was possibly the last of her kind, a living memory of an entire civilization. Yuna realized something profound. Arya wasn't just an alien specimen. She was a survivor, much like herself, carrying the weight of an unresolved loss. As hours passed, their communication deepened. Arya began showing complex memory structures, images of her home planet, of landscapes that no human had ever seen. Burning skies, crystalline mountains, oceans that moved like living creatures. The research team watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just scientific observation anymore. This was something more. A connection. An understanding. Yuna's colleagues started whispering. Some were excited. Others were scared. What did this mean for humanity's understanding of intelligent life? Arya's body continued to shift, now displaying complex patterns that the translation device struggled to interpret. But Yuna understood something fundamental. This was communication beyond words. This was pure emotional language. By midnight, something extraordinary had happened. Arya had shared more about her species in one night than in 7 years of previous research. Her defensive mechanisms had dropped. She was no longer just a specimen. She was a being with a history, with feelings, with a profound sense of loss. Yuna realized that vulnerability was the key. Not advanced technology, not complex scientific instruments, just the simple human ability to share pain, to acknowledge loss, to connect. The research facility felt different. The sterile white walls seemed to vibrate with a new understanding. Something fundamental had shifted. Arya's body was now a soft, peaceful silver, a color that seemed to represent a complex mix of emotions, sadness, hope, and something that felt remarkably like trust. Outside, the stars continued their silent watch. Another boundary had been crossed, another connection had been made, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, two beings, one human, one alien, had found a moment of shared understanding. The alarm screamed through the research facility at 0300 hours. Red emergency lights painted everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow. Colonel Park, no relation to Yuna, stood with a team of 6 heavily armed military specialists, their weapons trained on Arya's containment chamber. "She's too dangerous," the colonel declared. 7 years of research and we still can't predict her behavior. One wrong move could destroy everything. Yuna understood the stakes. But she also understood Arya in a way no one else did. Her research had revealed a complex intelligence, not a threat. "You're making a mistake," Yuna said, standing between the military team and the chamber. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. The military team had received specific orders: neutralize the potential threat. Arya represented an unknown variable in humanity's careful space exploration strategy. Her ability to transform, to adapt, made her unpredictable. Colonel Park's finger hovered near the command console. One button. Press would flood the chamber with a specialized neutralization gas, a mixture designed to instantly crystallize any biological matter. Arya sensed the tension. Her body began to shift, silver transforming into sharp, defensive crystalline structures. The research team's monitoring systems went wild, tracking her rapid biological changes. "Stand down," the colonel ordered Yuna. "This isn't a request." But Yuna didn't move. She knew what most of them didn't. Arya wasn't a weapon. She was a survivor, a being with emotions, with a complex understanding of loss and survival. The military team began to spread out, their specialized weapons creating a perfect kill zone around the chamber. Standard protocol for neutralizing unknown biological entities. Yuna's mind raced. She had spent months building trust with Arya, months understanding a communication method that went beyond human language, and now everything could be destroyed. In moments. "If you do this," Yuna said quietly, "you'll be destroying the most significant first contact opportunity in human history." The translation device on her belt suddenly activated. Arya's emotional signature began to pulse, not in aggression but in a complex pattern of fear and defensive readiness. Colonel Park hesitated. Something in Yuna's voice carried a weight that went beyond simple scientific argument. One alien doesn't represent a diplomatic opportunity, the colonel argued. It represents a potential extinction-level threat. But Yuna had evidence, recordings, translated communication fragments, proof that Arya was intelligent, that she could communicate, that she wasn't simply a weapon to be feared. The standoff lasted minutes, but those minutes felt like hours. Every breath was calculated, every movement watched. Arya's body continued to shift. But something was different. Instead of pure defensive transformation, her crystals were forming complex patterns, almost like a language, almost like a plea. The military team looked uncertain. Their training prepared them for combat, for neutralization. But nothing prepared them for this. An alien that seemed to be trying to communicate even in this moment of extreme tension. Yuna knew she was risking everything: her career, her reputation, possibly her life. "She's not a monster," Yuna said, softly. "She's a survivor." The translation device continued to pulse. Arya's emotional signature was complex: fear, yes, but also something else. Understanding, a desire to connect. Colonel Park's finger remained on the neutralization button. One press would end everything. The facility held its breath. Humans and alien faced each other. Communication hung in the balance. And in that moment, everything could change. The days following the confrontation changed everything. Yuna's evidence transformed the research facility from a containment center to a diplomatic exploration hub. Arya was no longer just a specimen. She had become a potential bridge between human understanding and alien intelligence. Scientific teams worked around the clock. Arya's communication methods were slowly decoded, revealing a complex history of her species that challenged everything humans knew about intelligent life. Her memories showed civilizations more advanced than anything humanity had imagined, societies that existed in forms beyond physical matter. Colonel Park, initially skeptical, became one of Arya's strongest advocates. The military's perspective shifted from seeing her as a threat to recognizing her as a potential strategic resource. Her ability to transform, to adapt, was no longer viewed as dangerous, but as a remarkable evolutionary achievement. Yuna's translation device became the key. It could now capture not just emotional signatures, but complex historical narratives. Arya shared stories of her civilization, how they were systematically eliminated by aggressive space-traveling races, how she survived by developing incredible, adaptive capabilities, The global scientific community watched with intense interest. Press conferences revealed fragments of Arya's communication, showing a being of incredible intelligence and emotional depth. She wasn't just surviving, she was trying to rebuild, to understand, to connect. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten. Space exploration teams began developing new communication strategies. Arya represented more than a scientific discovery. She represented a fundamental shift in how humanity understood intelligent life. Her crystalline body could store and transmit information in ways that human technology couldn't comprehend. She could compress centuries of information into moments, communicate complex ideas through color and molecular shifts that went beyond traditional language. Research revealed that Arya's species had developed a form of collective consciousness. They didn't just communicate, they shared experiences, memories, entire cultural histories through subtle biological transformations. Humans were just beginning to understand the complexity of her communication. The United Nations established a special research division dedicated to understanding Arya. Funding poured in from global scientific institutions. What was once a contained experiment became humanity's most significant exploration of alien intelligence. Una continued her work, becoming the primary liaison between human researchers and Arya. Her personal connection, her ability to see beyond fear had made this breakthrough possible. She understood that communication wasn't about technology. It was about empathy, about willingness to understand. Months passed. Arya began sharing technological insights. Her civilization had developed energy transmission methods that could revolutionize human space travel, sustainable technologies that could solve environmental challenges, communication methods that could connect distant civilizations. The research facility became a symbol of hope, a place where fear was replaced by understanding, where an alien, being once considered a monster, became a potential savior of human knowledge. Global tensions began to shift. If humanity could communicate with Arya, what other possibilities existed? The universe suddenly seemed smaller, more connected, more hopeful. Una often reflected on that first moment in the containment chamber. How a simple act of patience, of listening, had changed everything. How fear could be transformed into understanding with the right approach. Arya's body continued to shift and change, but now those changes were no longer seen as threatening. They were a language, a complex, beautiful language of survival, of hope, of connection. The stars outside seemed to watch, waiting, knowing that something fundamental had changed. Humanity had taken its first real step into a larger universe. And it all started with one researcher's willingness to look beyond fear, to see the intelligence behind the unknown. The transformation was complete, and it was just the beginning.